The rope burned against Kestrel's throat as she dangled from the ancient oak, her feet kicking frantically at empty air. The mob below jeered, calling her witch demon spawn, murderer of children. Through her fading vision, she saw a shadow streak. Across the moonlit clearing, a man in dark leather moving faster than humanly possible. Darius had been tracking the real killer for 3 towns when he heard the commotion. His enhanced senses, cursed gifts from his vampiric transformation decades ago, led him straight to the lynching. Without hesitation, he severed the rope with one razor-sharp claw, catching the gasping woman before she hit the ground. Witch! Someone screamed. The demon protects his own. Darius's crimson eyes blazed as he bared his fangs. The only demons here are you. His voice carried an otherworldly resonance that sent the mob stumbling backward. She's innocent. I can smell the real killer's scent still fresh in this town. Kestrel collapsed against his unnaturally cold chest, her lungs burning as precious air flooded back. She should have been terrified of this pale stranger with glowing eyes, but his arms felt like the first sanctuary she'd known in months. Why? Save me? She whispered. Because I know what it's like to be blamed for sins that aren't yours, he replied, his voice softer now, tinged with centuries of pain. The mob leader, a burly blacksmith named Garnett, stepped forward with a torch. Stand aside, bloodsucker. That woman poisoned 3 children. We have witnesses. You have fear and ignorance. Darius's nostrils flared. The real killer is among you. I can taste his guilt. His supernatural gaze swept the crowd until it landed on a nervous-looking merchant clutching a leather satchel. You, Orlin the traitor. You smell of wolfsbane and children's terror. Orlin's face went ashen. He lies. Vampires are master deceivers. But Kestrel was already studying the merchant with her healer's trained eye. Show us your hands, she commanded. Her voice hoarse but fierce. When Orlin instinctively hid his hands behind his back, Darius moved with inhuman speed. He seized the merchant's wrists, revealing fingers stained purple-black, the telltale sign of wolfsbane preparation. The children didn't die of sickness, Kestrel gasped, understanding flooding through her. Someone poisoned them. Someone who knew I'd be blamed because I treated them first. The crowd's bloodlust wavered as doubt crept in. Garnett lowered his torch slightly. Orlin, is this true? They ... They were going to expose my smuggling routes. Orlin crumbled, his composure shattered by Darius's otherworldly presence. Those children saw me moving contraband through their family's property. I had to protect my business. The confession hung in the night air like a death knell. The mob's fury redirected toward Orlin, but Darius was already lifting Kestrel in his arms. Justice is served, he said coldly. But we're leaving, now. As he carried her away from the chaos, Kestrel studied her mysterious savior's tortured features. His pale skin was like marble, beautiful but cold, and his eyes held depths of sorrow that spoke of terrible deeds. What sins do you carry? She asked quietly. More than you could forgive, Darius replied, his jaw clenching. I've killed innocents, Kestrel, fed on pure souls. Your salvation tonight doesn't balance my ledger. Perhaps, she said, her healer's instincts recognizing a wounded spirit. But redemption isn't about balance. It's about choice. Something in his dead heart stirred at her words. 3 days later, in an abandoned monastery deep in the thornwood forest, Kestrel tended to wounds that weren't visible on Darius's immortal flesh. She'd insisted on staying with him despite his protests, claiming she owed him a life debt. You don't understand. Darius paced the crumbling stone floor like a caged wolf. I'm not some misunderstood hero. I've torn apart families, left children, orphaned, turned lovers into widows. Kestrel ground herbs in a mortar, her movement steady and sure. Tell me about the first one you killed. His pacing stopped. What? The first innocent. Tell me their story. She looked up, her green eyes unafraid. If you're truly irredeemable, you'll have forgotten them. But if you remember every face, every name, then your soul isn't as dead as you believe. Darius's hands clenched into fists. Her name was Lirelei, a baker's daughter in Prague. 19 years old, golden hair that caught sunlight like spun wheat. She was carrying bread to the poor district when His voice broke, when the bloodlust took me. It was 1847, 3 months after my transformation. I was starving, mad with hunger, and she smelled like fresh rainfall and kind deeds. What did you do afterward? I held her until dawn nearly burned me alive. Wept over her body until her blood turned cold under my tears. His crimson eyes met Kestrel's. Then I found her family and left them enough gold to live comfortably. For generations, though it could never bring her back. Kestrel nodded slowly. And the others? Did you remember them all? Every single one. Matthias the monk in Vienna. Cordelia the seamstress in London. Henrik the shepherd boy in Norway. Each name fell from his lips like a prayer or curse. 43 innocents in my first decade. I stopped counting after the bloodlust finally learned to bow to my will. But you did learn to control it. Too late. Kestrel set down her mortar and approached him carefully, the way one might approach a wounded predator. Darius, in your 3 centuries of existence, how many have you saved? How many monsters have you stopped? How many innocent lives have you preserved? He stared at her in confusion. That doesn't matter. Good deeds don't erase. I'm not talking about erasure. I'm talking about growth. She reached out tentatively, her warm fingers brushing his cold cheek. The man who saved me from that noose wasn't the same creature who killed Lirelei. He was someone who chose mercy over vengeance, protection over predation. Darius caught her wrist, his grip gentle despite his supernatural strength. You don't know what you're saying. I could kill you right now. The hunger is always there, always waiting. Then why haven't you? Kestrel stepped closer, her pulse steady beneath his sensitive fingertips. You've been alone with me for 3 days. I've been injured, vulnerable, my blood singing its siren. Song to your enhanced senses. Yet here I stand, unmarked. His grip tightened fractionally. Because you remind me why I chose to starve rather than feed. Why I hunt the guilty instead of the innocent. Why I double quotes he trailed off, overwhelmed. Why you what? Why I still believe, somewhere in this dead heart, that maybe redemption is possible. Kestrel smiled, the expression transforming her entire face. Then let me help you find it. That night, she brewed him a tea from bloodroot and meditation herbs, sitting beside him as he struggled through memories he'd buried for decades. For the first time in centuries, Darius wasn't alone with his ghosts. Kestrel's past caught up with them at dawn. Darius woke to the sound of armored boots surrounding the monastery and the acrid smell of burning silver. Through the crumbling windows he saw 24 soldiers bearing the crimson cross of the Purification Order. They found us, Kestrel whispered, her face pale but resolved. Who are they? Darius's fangs extended instinctively as he positioned himself between her and the approaching threat. Hunters. Not the kind who track vampires, but those who eliminate anyone touched by magic. I've been running from them since I first showed healing abilities as a child. She gripped his arm. They won't negotiate. They'll kill us both and call it holy work. The lead hunter, a scarred woman named Commander Valdris, shouted through the walls. Kestrel Mornsong. By decree of the High Inquisitor, you are condemned for trafficking with demons and corrupting the natural order. Surrender the vampire and your death will be swift. Darius felt the familiar blood rage building, the same crimson fury that had consumed him in his early centuries. These zealots threatened the one person who'd shown him kindness, who'd made him believe in something beyond endless self-loathing. "I can slaughter them all," he growled, his eyes blazing like coals. "Silver weapons are painful, not fatal. I'll tear them apart and—" "No." Kestrel's firm voice cut through his mounting violence. "That path only leads to more innocents dying. Look closer, Darius. Really look." He focused his enhanced senses on the soldiers outside. Beneath their armor and religious fervor, he detected something unexpected: youth. Most of these hunters were barely adults, their hearts racing with fear disguised as righteous fury. They're children, he realized. Children raised to believe that mercy is weakness and difference is evil. Kestrel began gathering her healing supplies. If we fight, we become the monsters they were taught we are. If we run, they'll pursue us until one side lies dead. Then, what do you suggest? A sad smile crossed her lips. I show them what they're really fighting. Before Darius could stop her, Kestrel stepped outside with her hands raised. I surrender. She called to the hunters. But I request trial by witness. Let me demonstrate my true nature before you pass judgment. Commander Valdris approached cautiously, silver crossbow trained on Kestrel's heart. Witnesses to what, witch? To whether my gifts come from darkness or light. One of the young soldiers suddenly cried out, collapsing. His blood poured from a wound in his leg. The silver arrowhead had somehow reversed, piercing his own thigh. As his comrades rushed to help, Kestrel moved without hesitation. Let me heal him, she said simply. Stand back. Valdris snarled. Your dark magic won't touch him. But the wounded soldier, a boy no older than 17, was already dying. The silver arrow had struck an artery, and his life was ebbing away in crimson streams. His terrified eyes met Kestrel's. Please, he whispered, ignoring the weapons trained on her. Kestrel knelt beside him and placed her hands over his wound. Golden. Light emanated from her palms, warm and gentle as summer sunlight. The bleeding stopped, flesh knitted together, and color returned to the boy's pale cheeks. The healing left Kestrel swaying with exhaustion, but her eyes blazed with inner fire. Does evil heal? She asked the stunned hunters. Does darkness restore? Life? Commander Valdris's crossbow wavered. Deception. Vampire tricks. Then test me further, Kestrel challenged. Bring me your wounded. You're sick. You're dying. Let me show you what I truly am. From the shadows of the monastery, Darius watched in amazement as his salvation played out before him. In trying to prove her own innocence, Kestrel was teaching him the most profound lesson of all, that redemption wasn't about forgetting the past, but about choosing who to become in spite of it. The young soldier Kestrel had healed, a farm boy named Jorik, refused to stand against her. 3 other hunters had minor injuries, old battle wounds that ached in the cold, and despite Commander Valdris's furious orders, they allowed the accused witch to touch them. Golden light flowed from Kestrel's hands, mending torn muscles, easing chronic pain, restoring what violence had taken away. With each healing, more of the purification order's certainty crumbled. This is impossible, whispered a female hunter whose sword arm had been useless for months until Kestrel's touch restored it. The texts say all magic corrupts, all power demands blood sacrifice. Perhaps, Darius said, stepping from the shadows, your texts are wrong. Crossbows swiveled toward him, but several hunters hesitated. They just witnessed genuine healing, pure and selfless. The vampire before them was clearly dangerous, but he stood protectively near their healer, not threateningly. Commander Valdris, however, remained unmoved. Vampires are masters of illusion. He's corrupted her, made her his thrall. I am no one's thrall, Kestrel said firmly, though the healings had left her trembling with exhaustion. And he's not what you think, He's an abomination. A dead thing that feeds on the living. Yes, Darius said quietly. I am all of those things, but I'm also more. He began to speak, his voice carrying across the clearing with otherworldly resonance. He told them of Lirelei and the 42 other innocents, naming each one, describing their lives and dreams cut short by his hunger. Several hunters shifted uncomfortably as they realized this supposed monster knew intimate details about people he'd killed centuries ago. But, Darius continued, I also remember Victor Draculefti, the plague doctor I saved in 1603, Marina Blackthorn, the poisoned duchess the first warned before assassins could strike, Captain Henrik van der Berg, whose ship I guided away from rocks. That would have claimed 200 souls. His crimson eyes swept the assembled hunters. In 3 centuries, I've taken 43 innocent lives. I've saved over 3,000. Lies, Valdres hissed, but her voice lacked conviction. Young Jorik stepped forward, his healed legs strong beneath him. Commander, what if it's not lies? What if we've been taught to see only one side of truth? The Order's doctrine is absolute. The Order's doctrine is wrong. Every head turned toward the new voice. From the forest emerged an elderly man in simple brown robes, his eyes kind but firm. Several hunters immediately dropped to one knee. High Inquisitor Matthias, Valdres breathed. Darius stiffened. This was the man whose orders had sent armies after innocents whose fanaticism had turned healing into heresy. But as the High Inquisitor approached, his weathered face showed not hatred, but profound weariness. Rise, my children, Matthias said gently. I've come because I've been watching this exchange through scrying crystals. What I've witnessed today has shaken my faith to its foundations. He walked directly to Kestrel, ignoring the vampire entirely. Your healing light. It's not drawn from infernal sources, is it? It comes from within, from your own life force. Kestrel nodded weakly. It always has. Every wound I mend costs me something, but I give it willingly. And you, Matthias turned to Darius with surprising calm, you protect her not because she serves you, but because you serve a higher purpose. I serve redemption, Darius replied. Or try to? The High Inquisitor was quiet for a long moment, his ancient eyes seeing beyond the surface. 50 years I've led the Purification Order. 50 years of hunting those touched by power, convinced that all magic was corruption. He looked at his assembled hunters, these young warriors raised on his teachings. But I've never seen healing like this. Never witnessed a vampire who remembers his victims with such anguish, such remorse. Commander Valdres's world was crumbling around her. Inquisitor, surely you don't mean to, I mean to question everything we've believed, Matthias said firmly. If we are wrong about these two, how many others have we condemned unjustly? The High Inquisitor's crisis of faith rippled through the assembled hunters like a stone thrown into still water. Some, like young Jorik and the woman whose arm Kestrel had healed, embraced this new understanding eagerly. Others stood frozen, their entire worldview fracturing. Commander Valdres, however, refused to bend. This is heresy, she snarled, raising her silver crossbow. The vampire has corrupted you all with his lies. The only lies here are the ones we've told ourselves, Matthias replied sadly. Valdres, I trained you from childhood. You've been like a daughter to me. Please, open your heart to. The crossbow bolt flew straight at the High Inquisitor's chest. But Darius moved faster, his supernatural speed carrying him between bolt and target. The silver arrow punched through his shoulder, sending liquid fire through his undead nervous system. No! Kestrel rushed to his side as he staggered, black blood seeping from the wound. You fool, silver could have killed you. Better me than him, Darius gasped, his pale skin growing even whiter. He's trying to change things, to make it better. Valdris reloaded with mechanical precision, her eyes wild with fanaticism. "I'll purify you all, even if I must act alone." But she wasn't alone. 3 other hunters, hardliners who couldn't accept their leader's transformation, moved to flank her. The remaining soldiers found themselves torn between old teachings and new truths, weapons wavering uncertainly. "Choose," Matthias said, his voice heavy with sorrow. "Follow Commander Valdris down the path of blind hatred, or help me forge a new way forward." The standoff stretched like a held breath. Then Kestrel did something that changed everything. Still supporting the wounded vampire, she began to sing. Her voice rose clear and pure, a healing song passed down through generations of her family. But this wasn't magic in the way the Order understood it, no summoned power, no bargains with dark forces. This was simply human will made manifest, love given form through music and intention. The silver in Darius's shoulder began to dissolve, not through supernatural means, but through the simple, stubborn refusal of his body to die while such beauty existed in the world. His wound closed not because of magic, but because sometimes love is stronger than death. One by one, the hunters lowered their weapons. Even the hardliners found themselves unable to maintain their hatred in the face of such pure compassion. Only Valdris remained unmoved, her finger tightening on the trigger. "I'll kill the witch first," she whispered. "Then the vampire. Then anyone else who stands in the way of purity." "No," said a quiet voice. One of her own followers, a young woman named Syrah, stepped forward. "I won't let you become the monster we were supposed to hunt." Other voices joined. Hers, "Stand down, Commander. This isn't justice. Please, there's been enough death." Valdris found herself surrounded by her own soldiers, their weapons now pointed at her instead of the supposed enemies. Tears of rage and bewilderment streamed down her scarred cheeks. "I don't understand," she sobbed. "We had purpose. We had certainty. Now what do we have?" High Inquisitor Matthias approached his fallen commander with infinite gentleness. "We have a chance to be better. To heal instead of harm, to protect instead of persecute." He held out his weathered hand. "Will you take it?" For a moment, Valdris teetered on the edge between fanaticism and redemption. Then, slowly, her crossbow clattered to the ground as she collapsed into her mentor's embrace, weeping for all the years of misdirected zeal. Darius watched the scene unfold with wonder. "Is this what forgiveness looks like?" he asked Kestrel softly. "This is what it begins to look like," she replied, helping him stand. "True forgiveness is a practice, not a moment." 3 months later, the abandoned monastery had been transformed into something unprecedented, a sanctuary where the supernatural and mundane worked together. High Inquisitor Matthias had officially dissolved the Purification Order, replacing it with the Circle of Understanding, a group dedicated to building bridges instead of burning them. Kestrel established a healing center in the monastery's former chapel, treating anyone who needed help regardless of their nature. Humans, vampires, werewolves, even a few reformed demons found refuge there. Her reputation spread across the continent, drawing both patients and would-be healers eager to learn. Her methods. Darius had become something unique, a vampire who hunted not for blood, but for justice. Working with reformed members of the old order, he tracked down supernatural criminals while protecting innocents of all species. The silver sensitivity that had once been his weakness became his strength. He could sense malevolent magic from miles away, arriving in time to prevent tragedies. But the most profound changes were personal. "Tell me again about Lirelay," Kestrel said one evening as they walked through the monastery gardens. "Must I?" Darius sighed, though without real reluctance. This had become their ritual, not to forget his past, but to transform it. Not her. Death. Her life. Doris smiled, an expression that had become more natural over the months. She loved wildflowers, had a laugh like silver bells, used to leave extra bread on windowsills for stray cats. His voice no longer carried the crushing weight of self-hatred. She dreamed of opening a bakery where poor children could eat for free. And what have you done in her honor? Funded 17 bakeries across Europe that feed the hungry without payment required. Saved 43 children from various supernatural threats, one for each innocent life I took. Taught former hunters to recognize the difference between predator and protector. Kestrel took his cold hand in her warm one. She would be proud. You think so? I know so. Because I see her legacy living through you every day. They paused beside a fountain where moonlight turned the water to liquid silver. Other couples might have found the scene romantic, but for them it represented something deeper. The possibility that even the most cursed existence could find meaning. I have something to tell you, Kestrel said softly. The healing work, the constant use of my power, it's aging me faster than it should. The physicians estimate I have perhaps 10 more years. Darius went rigid. No, there has to be a way. 2. There is no way, and I wouldn't take it if there were. Her green eyes blazed with conviction. I've seen what happens when people try to cheat death. But this isn't about endings, Darius. It's about making the time we have matter. 10 years, he whispered. For a being who had lived 3 centuries, it felt like a heartbeat. 10 years to love completely, to heal more souls. To prove that redemption isn't just possible, it's inevitable when we choose it daily. She turned to face him fully. Will you spend those years with me? Not as penance for your past, but as celebration of what we've become? Darius had spent decades learning to forgive himself. But in that moment he realized he'd also learned something else, how to hope for the future. Every night, he promised. Every dawn I can survive, every moment between. Behind them, the monastery bells rang midnight, but for the first time in centuries, Darius didn't hear it as the tolling of the damned. Instead, it sounded like the beginning of something beautiful. 9 years later, Kestrel lay in the simple bed they'd shared, her once vibrant hair now silver, her face lined with the beautiful erosion of a life well lived. But her eyes still blazed with the same inner fire that had first captivated Darius. Do you regret it? She whispered, her voice paper-thin but unwavering. Giving up eternity for these few years? Darius held her hand gently, marveling at how fragile mortality was, how precious for its very fragility. I didn't give up eternity. I found it. Around them, the monastery thrived as it had for nearly a decade. Former hunters trained alongside reformed vampires. Kestrel's healing techniques had been taught to hundreds of students. The Circle of Understanding had branches in 12 countries, turning ancient enemies into allies. Tell me what you see, Kestrel said, knowing this would likely be their last conversation. I see Jorik teaching vampire younglings how to resist bloodlust through meditation. I see Sarah leading a team that just rescued a group of innocents from a genuine dark cult. I see High Inquisitor Matthias writing new codes of ethics for supernatural law enforcement. His voice grew stronger with each word. I see Commander Valdris running a halfway house for supernatural beings struggling with their nature. And what do you see when you look at yourself? Darius was quiet for a moment, remembering the self-loathing creature who had saved a woman from a noose nearly a decade ago. I see someone who learned that forgiveness isn't about forgetting the past, but about refusing to let it define the future. Kestrel smiled, the expression transforming her aged features with remembered beauty. Then my work is done. No, Darius said firmly, your work will never be done. It lives in every person you've healed, every mind you've changed, every heart you've opened. It lives in me. As dawn approached, Kestrel's breathing grew shallower, but she wasn't afraid. She had given everything she had to give, loved completely, healed without reservation. Her legacy would ripple outward through centuries, touching lives not yet born. "Promise me something," she whispered. "Anything. When I'm gone, don't retreat into that cold castle of self-hatred. Keep choosing forgiveness. Keep choosing love. Keep choosing to be the man I know you are. I promise." Kestrel closed her eyes as the first rays of sunlight streamed through the window. For the first time in his undead existence, Darius didn't flee from dawn. Instead, he let the light wash over both of them, warm and golden and full of possibility. She died as she had lived peacefully, surrounded by love, her final breath a whisper of contentment. Darius wept then, great racking sobs that shook his immortal frame. But these weren't tears of despair. They were tears of gratitude for having known love, for having learned forgiveness, for having discovered that redemption was not just possible but inevitable when one chose it daily. When the tears finally stopped, he found himself surrounded by their chosen family, former hunters and reformed supernatural beings, all drawn by the bond they shared through Kestrel's influence. They grieved together, but they also celebrated a life that had changed everything. That evening, as they laid Kestrel to rest in the monastery garden she had loved, Darius spoke the eulogy. "She saved me from a noose of my own making, one woven from centuries of guilt and self-hatred. In return, I thought I was saving her life. But the truth is, she was always the stronger one. She was always the teacher, and I was always the student." He looked around at the assembled mourners, humans and vampires, former enemies now united in love and loss. "She taught us that forgiveness isn't weakness but the greatest strength. That redemption isn't earned through suffering, but chosen through service. That love doesn't end with death but continues through those whose lives we've touched." Years passed, decades. The monastery became a legend, then a historical site, then a shrine to the possibility of change. The circle of understanding grew into a worldwide organization that prevented supernatural conflicts before they began, and through it all, Darius kept his promise. He chose forgiveness daily for others and for himself. He chose love over hatred, hope over despair, service over selfishness. He never forgot his sins, but he refused to let them define him. Sometimes, on particularly difficult nights, he would sit by Kestrel's grave and tell her about his day, about the lives saved, the hearts changed, the bridges built between worlds. He would swear he could feel her approval in the gentle night breeze, hear her laughter in the whisper of leaves. He had learned that true love doesn't end with death. It transforms into something larger, something that echoes through eternity in the lives we've touched and the good we've done. Kestrel had saved him from the noose of his own despair, and in return, he carried her message of redemption and forgiveness into a world that desperately needed to hear it. Their love story became legend, but the legend became truth lived out in countless daily acts of compassion, understanding, and hope. And in that truth, both of them found the eternity they had been seeking all along.